Hey guys, welcome back to the Life by Taylor podcast, where we learn and grow together. I'm still getting used to recording this on audio and video, and as much as I would like to say that it doesn't affect my ability to just flow authentically, it's kind of weird. I'm like, do I look at the microphone? Do I look at the computer? Do I look at the screen? If you're watching this on YouTube, hello, make sure that you subscribe below. And on today's podcast episode, I'm going to be talking about something that's very personal, but I do think it's a really important message and something that I don't see enough people talking about. I feel like there's a lot online about hookup culture and how everyone should just be sexually liberated, and all these influencers promoting all of these different ways to masturbate and whatever it is. And I've made a choice recently that goes kind of against all of that. It's very much against the mainstream culture, and I thought I would share why, because I think that some people intuitively might feel like this is right for them and just need their intuition to be validated. Other people might not be aware of the price they're paying with certain lifestyle choices they're making. And I think in general, everyone can benefit from learning about how sacred our sexual energy is and how intentional it should be, and how important it is to go about it in a meaningful and intentional way. Now, of course, this is all me talking about my personal experience. I say this a lot because it's so important that just because I'm on this side of the screen, just because I'm the one recording the podcast, doesn't mean I'm speaking from a place where I think everyone needs to do this and it's good for everyone. So if it wasn't clear, today I'm going to be talking about why I've recently committed to being celibate. And unlike the weed, which is very obvious to me that I really do want that to be a lifelong commitment, and if I do bring weed back in any way, every time I entertain that thought, it just sounds like a bad idea. So I do think weed is, I'm pretty committed to making weed a lifelong thing, but this isn't something that I'm committing to for life. This is something that I feel that as of now is important for me to commit to. I'm going to share what led me to make this decision and what's been challenging, what's been rewarding, and why I think it's a good idea for me at this time in my life. I looked through a few books that I've read that mention the second chakra and sexual energy, and I didn't really find something that presents the information that I would like to share that is important for the context of my personal journey. So I'm going to read an answer that Sadhguru shared to a certain question about this topic, and I will elaborate from there about my personal experience. So the question is celibacy a necessity on the spiritual path? And this is his answer. The whole dimension of spirituality is to grow beyond the physical, to taste something beyond the physical. If your involvement with the physical is very deep, naturally, your attachment to the body is very strong. It is not sex per se which can be an impediment in one's growth, but one's attachment to the body definitely is an impediment. There is no question about that. Generally, sexuality breeds that attachment. Celibacy has been talked about in that context. But does the sexual act itself stop a person from pursuing his spiritual path? Not at all. But what is being said is unless your focus is strong and one-pointed, the chances of progress or the progress itself will naturally be very slow because you are thinking in many directions at the same time. For a person who wants to go all out and do things in a short time, the advice is definitely not to get entangled with these bodily aspects, because then you will get involved in many things. For many people, if they start out with any kind of physical involvement with something, emotions and thoughts follow, and their whole life becomes just that. They cannot keep their focus on anything else. If you are absolutely conscious in every aspect of your life, nothing that you do in your life is an impediment. But that is a faraway thing for most people. Compulsiveness to consciousness. Though people would like to protect their sexuality as a very conscious process, it is not so. It is a compulsive process. Maybe it is handled a little consciously by some people while others do it compulsively. But essentially, the basic ingredient and seed of sexuality is a compulsive process. It is physiological and chemical. It is a function of hormones which drive you in that direction. Unless you are able to transcend all compulsiveness within you, it is definitely an impediment in that sense. Any kind of activity, whether it's eating, sexuality, talking, or whatever, if it is a compulsive process, if you are enslaved to it, it is an impediment. If you look at what is causing this compulsiveness, if you understand that and handle that aspect, compulsiveness goes away. That means you are definitely moving towards freedom. If one pursues a spiritual path, irrespective of where he is right now, he will gradually evolve out of many compulsions within himself. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background information on what can be seen as a common perspective on sexual energy and using it intentionally or using it compulsively or indulging in it compulsively. like he said, in everything, it's all about the intention. It's all about the consciousness that goes into it. And unfortunately, when it comes to sex, most of the time it's a very compulsive act. It's not something that's done intentionally, and it's not done consciously. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and why I've arrived at this decision. For most of my life, I had a very unhealthy and very unconscious relationship to sex. I grew up in a culture and an environment that encouraged me to be sexual at a very young age. I never treated it as something that is sacred. I was very mindless and absent in the choices I made around how I share my body and with whom I share my body. And it was only when I had my first boyfriend that I realized how traumatizing it was for me. I wasn't even aware of how much it weighed heavy on me until I had sex with someone who actually loved me and cared about me and respected me, that it led me to literally cry the first time I had that experience, because I realized that what I was doing until then was absolutely not what sex was supposed to be. And without going into too many details, I would say that I semi-healed that part of myself by having normal relationships with guys that actually love me, and a mutual respect for each other and a connection that goes beyond the physical. But then there was a time in my life where I was like, okay, well, now that I'm not a naive child doing this from a place of insecurity and I'm not in a relationship, there's a part of me that does want to have fun, right? Quote unquote, have fun. And yeah, it can be fun for sure. But what it ended up creating is this habit of, whenever I want validation, whenever I want to feel attractive, whenever I want male attention, I go there. And on one hand, I'm kind of happy I let myself have those experiences, because I think it was important for me. There was obviously a part of me that wanted to feel liberated and wanted to enjoy doing that casually without feeling like I can't, without feeling shame around it, which is a huge thing, especially for women. That I remember when I used to have sex casually, I would wake up feeling dirty. I would wake up feeling like ashamed of myself, like I'm not pure. And I'm happy I got to a place where I could definitely overcome that part of it and enjoy it and not feel ashamed about it, and and on some level even feel empowered in my ability to make those choices, enjoy it, and choose partners carefully that I know respect me and love me on some level. And that was a really important part of my journey, honestly. But this is the longest time I've spent single in my adult life. I had 3 back-to-back serious relationships that lasted 2 to 3 years. And of course, there were little casual things in between, but I haven't been single for a prolonged period of time. And being single for this long has allowed me to notice when I feel that urge to sleep with someone, or when I feel that urge to maybe hook up with someone casually. And as someone who tries to be very consciously aware of my thoughts and my feelings and my body, I notice that there's a pattern. It's always at a time where I feel insecure, where I feel lonely, where I feel bored. It's not really coming from a place where I feel the need to connect more deeply with someone. It's a way to numb certain pain and certain uncomfortable feelings that come up for me. Of course, I'm a human being and temptation is real. And any time that I actually gave into it, I regretted it immediately after. I was just like, why did I do that? That was not enjoyable. I didn't actually want to do that. And another thing I think people don't talk about enough is the fact that when you are exchanging, when you are sharing your body with another person, you are actually sharing energy with that person. You are giving your energy to that person, and you're also absorbing theirs on some level. And that may sound woo-woo to people, but it's real. It's actually real. You are connecting on such a deep physical level, and there's no way you're not leaving that experience with a part of that person and without giving away part of you to that person. So this decision kind of started with me saying that I will start being very intentional about who I do this with, because I take a lot of care of my energy. I really invest so much time and energy and put so much into having pure energy. And not only am I giving it away, I'm also absorbing energy that is of someone who isn't taking care of themselves, who doesn't have a healthy lifestyle, who doesn't feel good emotionally, who might be carrying a lot of trauma in their body. And I realize that's just not for me anymore. I don't want to, it's very simple. I just don't want to do that anymore. And I have not read much about this topic, but I can tell you that intuitively, what it feels like to me is that I don't know my worth. and that I'm minimizing my worth to the most superficial part of who I am. And no matter how good it feels in the short term, I've just become too spiritually aware to not feel the cost my soul pays afterwards. I would say that's another thing that I think women have this power where they can seduce a man or they can attract a man, and they could be attractive to a man, and there's something exciting about that and there's something fun about that. But we really miss out on the fact that we give that away to people who don't deserve it. The idea of having someone touch my body or get that intimate with me that doesn't even know me that well or doesn't love me and doesn't see me on the deepest level, something about that is just doesn't sit well with me at this point in my life. Now, before I sound like this holy person who is able to overcome all of her desires, I have to be honest and say that last week I had this like breaking point where I was like very tempted, very much in the mood, and I reached out to someone who I used to hook up with, and luckily the universe had my back and it didn't work out because I sat with that temptation long enough where it kind of faded away, and I was like, thank God that didn't happen. And I don't want to pretend like the temptation doesn't come up for me. Like, I don't have any moment where I'm like, oh, just like whatever, fuck it, let's go, who cares, like let's have fun, you're young, live a little, you're single. Of course my mind goes there, especially with the content online and how hookup culture has become so glamorized, and there's so many influencers talking about how you should just hook up with people and not be ashamed of it and whatever and have a good time. But I truly believe that, like he said, you are feeding your physical self more than your spiritual self when you're doing that with the wrong intention. And again, there's nothing wrong with having sex, of course, that's not what I'm saying. But I recognized within myself that I was doing it for the wrong reasons, that I almost had to be unconscious to do it. I had to like disconnect spiritually to get myself to do these things, because if there was an awareness there, it was telling me don't. It was telling me not to. That's really where I'm at when it comes to this subject. This actually sparked my curiosity to read a little bit more in depth what certain spiritual teachers and texts say about sexual energy and sharing it and celibacy, and why it's recommended, or what benefits it has, or how to go about it in a more conscious way when you do. And I guess there will be a part 2 for this one, because I just wanted to share my personal experience, give you guys the gist of it, but by doing this, I actually am inspired to read more and understand more. So that is it for today's episode. Short and sweet. I love you guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you click subscribe. If you're listening to this on an audio streaming platform and you haven't already, please rate the podcast. And of course, if you feel called to support this podcast and to help me make these episodes possible, click below where it says support this podcast, and you can subscribe to a monthly donation. That really means so much to me. Thanks again. I love you guys, and I will be back tomorrow.